Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and today I'm looking at a book which has come to us from Hart Publishing. They're part of the Bloomsbury PLC company. They're an important publishing house, Hart. They produce some very useful books for both academics and practitioners. This one I thought was particularly interesting and directly relevant to much of what I do in my practice and other people do, and I also think it's a very topical subject. It's the subject of data profiling and insurance law. Now, it's been written by Brendan McGurk. We'll have a look at the book in a minute. As I said, it comes from Hart. Elizabeth wrote the original lead review, and I have then sort of modified it and changed it a bit, having had a discussion with her as to where we were going with the work. We've given our review title the following: in the context of insurance, when data profiling becomes a byword for risk profiling, any number of legal issues can arise. And I think that is really what the issue is all about. Let's have a look at the book first. It's a hardback. It's a very small book. There we go. Hardback, front, spine, and there's nothing much on the back. You see the spine there. Now, when we open it up, there's very little. It says Brendan McGurk is a barrister at Monkton Chambers. That's it, okay, for the back. The front, there's a bit of blurb about the book itself. We haven't really borrowed much of that because we've given our own appreciation of what we think of the book. It's obviously described as timely and expertly written monograph book. Now, if we go to the back again, we can just see there are a total number of pages, under 300. The index at the back is about page numbering, so you should be able to find things pretty quickly. It's not a detailed index, but it's reasonably helpful. You can see there are footnotes as well. The index is by page numbering, not paragraph numbering. We go to the front of the book. First of all, the front page. There's some blurb again repeated from the dust cover there about the actual book itself, and then you've got the actual front page. Then you've got the blurb there, and I'm just going to show you this. This is the dedication. We always show the dedications. A lot of people involved in these books. We only review books which we think are important and relevant for for practitioners and academics, and I don't review books which are not very good, because there's no point. It's just not fair on the author or anybody else. So basically we're being very positive with what we do. Now, Brendan has written his acknowledgements point there, and we then get the detailed contents of the book structured in various parts all the way through. It's quite detailed. You have to have some knowledge of data profiling and of course of legal matters, regulatory remedies and conclusions and so forth. There are in total 9 chapters and 5 parts. Then you've got some case law based initially with the United Kingdom, as it's called, not England and Wales, but European Union then. So it's spread, obviously, because we've got the Supreme Court, which covers everything in the UK, and you've also got the European Court of Human Rights, because there is an overlap, of course. Then there's a table of legislation, a little bit of legislation again by country, and sends some statutory instruments at the end. Then EU legislation, of course, which is it features quite a lot in many of the books today, and will continue to do so irrespective of Brexit, and international treaties at the bottom. Then we start with an introduction, the scope of the book itself, how it's structured, setting out how he's done it, the big impact, big data's impact on the insurance world, then a whole range of other points, good faith and so forth, then leading into how big data is transforming insurance and so forth. And things are moving ahead very quickly. As I say, it's under 300 pages. It's not a book, if I can put it this way, it's not a book for people who have no knowledge. You have to have some understanding of how data profiling works, and also some understanding of insurance law. Now, practitioners at the bar certainly will have quite a lot of knowledge, but in any event, the information contained here will broaden that knowledge. Those who are pestering me over CPD and all that sort of stuff, well, continuous professional development is about, although we don't include reviews, it is about reading books like this and understanding what is happening within your particular let's say, your own particular practice legally or whatever it may be. So therefore it's quite useful to know the existence of the book, hence the fact that we do the reviews and I do this presentation. But as I say, Elizabeth was lead writer on this, and this is what we say. Insurance lawyers or anyone professionally involved in the insurance industry in all its forms and manifestations should have a read of this book, which is a recent title from Hart Publishing Limited, which is part of Bloomsbury. The title refers to the relatively recent emergence of new technologies and their impact within the insurance industry and on insurance law, and they have been, in my view, quite profound, in fact, and they are going to continue in the 2020s to basically be have quite an effect on the way we do things. So under discussion here is what is called big data, and that is featured very much in the book throughout, a term which generates a range of reactions varying from suspicion, apprehension and sheer terror to awe, excitement and delight, because it can mean quite a lot, big data. I've come across it before, but I've always felt that it was for the very young, modern, thrusting professionals that they would use that word, but I've suddenly come to realise that big data has got a very substantial meaning in its own way, and that's why I'm using, and that's of course why Brendan is using that title. Now the author, as I say, Brendan McGurk, is a barrister, and he's acknowledged as an expert in insurance law, and he explains that the thesis of this book is that the ongoing transformation of insurance practice in the age of big data has a consequential impact on the principles of insurance law, and that obviously is a shoo-in. It's quite clear that is what is going to happen, because we're going through a very substantial transformation at the moment in the business of business and the way that we use various facilities available to us in a different way. And if I can put it as nicely and as trying to put it as simply as I can. Of course, like most forms of technological innovation, big data appears to have raised as many problems as it's solved, particularly in respect of the frameworks by which it is or isn't regulated. Now that is always the problem. Now for whatever you get as a plus, you're going to get a minus, because you always get the advantages and the disadvantages. The difficulty of course here is, again, regulation, and it's about control. And we've got, even my own practice at the bar, I have a whole series of regulatory organisations that cover what I'm doing. As a mediator I don't really have any, but certainly I do have the Bar Standards Board to consider, and I also of course have data protection and all sorts of other matters that have to be taken into account. And data of course has always been needed by insurers in order to assess risk and price insurance products accordingly. And as McGurk points out, information about individual risks has from the very beginnings of the insurance business informed insurers' underwriting decisions as well as pricing policies, claims handling and the detection and prevention of fraud. Again, a big problem area. I'm sure you've come across them. I have. The serial claimant who is fraudster. Now you do get that happening. It's got to be stamped out. But again, you've got the profiling that can assist sometimes, but I'm afraid there are bound to be cases that slip through the net. So what exactly is big data then? The simple and perhaps oversimplified answer is that big data means more data. Unbelievably huge amounts of it. That's been the problem with the computer, putting it in its bluntest form, because you've got more and more information. Look at the internet. Look at the huge amount of information that's now available. So therefore, it's with the internet, for instance, it's about selection of information. It's not just about amassing and understanding it. It's about selection and going to the right places, and that's really partly what it's about. So essentially, what it has become is a digitized information. In fact, basically a group of digitized information. And a definition quoted by the author is this: it is high volume, high velocity information of the kind that enables enhanced insights and decision making. That's what we've got. That's what we're going to have in the future, so we've got to know how to deal with it. Now, as I said earlier, the problem about the word big data was probably seen as a little bit of a joke initially, but it isn't, because you're talking about huge amounts of information. And so therefore you get an idea. With a computer, you get an idea of the huge amount of stuff that it can store. And of course, with artificial intelligence coming along, we are going to be into a very new world in the 2020s very quickly. And the new generations coming up are going to face that in a probably a very different way from the way in the last 50 years, I've faced work within the legal world. Now, in considering big data from an English law perspective, this book deals generally with its current and potential impact on the insurance business, and also the way in which tools such as predictive analytics will enable more accurate predicting of and pricing of risk. Because of course, do remember the fundamentals. We're talking here about the concepts of risk in the process, and that's always going to be the forefront. It's certainly very, very directly relevant in insurance law. The obvious implication here, of course, is that big data and predictive analytics will give rise to a relentlessly increasing range of legal and regulatory issues, i.e. volume, huge amount. It's also pointed out that the automated processing tools such as algorithms, so getting very technical here immediately, which further enable insurers to assess risks, that's basically balancing it all, will inevitably invite profiling. In the context of insurance, says the author, data profiling becomes a byword for risk profiling, and that is what it's all about. And of course, the point about data profiling and risk profiling is that you've got to try and work out what the trend is and where they're going, so that you can work out and assess how much of a risk, especially if it's a law firm, how much of a risk they're taking on, and obviously in insurance companies in the same position. Also, of course, discussed in the book are the ramifications of the good faith duty of disclosure, sometimes not altogether properly adhered to, I hasten to add, including the ways in which it can and does apply both to insurers and the insured. That, I think, is again an important point. And in the final section, the book deals with the development of common law remedies available to the insured for data-related breaches by insurers of regulatory law. That includes, of course, equality law and competition law as well. And these are new, relatively recent emerging areas of law which we didn't really have in the past, but have become very important with the advent of the age of the computer, and of course what we're now going to be faced with in the 2020s, AI. And now, from an academic's point of view to an insurance law's point of view, readers will appreciate, we think, the detailed and thorough examination given here by the author, and the analysis in this, what is called a monograph, of what is developing into a very complex subject. I'm very grateful we've got it, because I do think this is an area that we've got to place more emphasis and have a greater understanding of. So it's reassuring that Brendan McGurk is an established expert in the field, notably as the co-author with Mark Cannon, Queen's Counsel, of a book called Professional and Indemnity Insurance, which is now in its second edition, published by OUP. Now, the publication date of the first edition of this book, Data Profiling and Insurance Law, is cited as at the 21st of March 2019, and I'm reviewing the book in the summer of 2019. There's the front and green cover. It probably looks more black to you on the video, but it's actually a green cover. See the front of it, then the spine, and then, as I say, it's a light book. As I said, it's not even 300 pages. I did like the conclusions part at the back, chapter 9, summary of the argument being put forward about where we're going. I think probably if you've got a reasonable amount of basic knowledge, this is a book you can probably zip through quite quickly. The only thing I would say is there is a lot of stuff in it, dealing especially with, I mean, for instance, we've got a number of statutory provisions and, of course, European provisions. You do have footnotes which are helpful too. You can skip those when you're reading through as a basic reading. But again, you see the parts structure there. Part 3 is the impact of regulatory law on insurance law, regulatory constraints. We are, whether we like it or not, in the age of regulation. It's not going to change too much. There are a lot of people who don't like it. I'm a bit suspicious about the over-regulation of certain things. I'd like to see less of it. I'm sure a lot of other people will. But we do have to have them, the regulation there, safeguards. Thank you, Brendan, and thank you very much to Hart for the opportunity of reviewing this work, which I think is an important one for the 21st century. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.